Department of Health, the capital. Miss Lydia Jones, your application for the government-sponsored fellowship has been approved. You and your cohort of doctors will soon be dispatched to Europe. In the office, the director handed the stamped document to Lydia Jones, who stood before him. Miss Jones, you and Miss Cecily Jones have been swapping this spot back and forth. Are you truly certain this time? There can be no going back. Lydia solemnly took the application and took a deep breath. Director, Cecily and I have reached an agreement. There will be no more changes. The director nodded. Good, then go back and prepare. Say your goodbyes to your family. Stepping out of the Department of Health, Lydia stood on the steps, gazing outside. It was noon. A gentle breeze was blowing. Under the shade of the trees, workers were riding bicycles in groups, leisurely heading home. The ringing of bicycle bells intertwined with the chirping of cicadas, composing a melodious tune. Lydia Jones, a sudden voice pulled her from her trance. Lydia turned to see Cecily Jones standing at the bottom of the steps, hands on her hips, looking at her with impatience. I've done what I promised you. What about your end of the deal? We agreed. I give you the fellowship spot, and you divorce Ethan Grant and let him be mine. Hearing the word, let, Lydia smiled self-deprecatingly, her eyes filled with complex emotions. She was the chief surgeon at the Capitol Hospital, and Ethan Grant was a young, high-ranking Air Force commander. They were childhood sweethearts, the golden couple. Everyone said they were a perfect match. On the day he proposed, Ethan had knelt on one knee in front of everyone, swearing solemnly to love and protect her until death. That was until 6 months ago, when Cecily appeared at the Jones household with a DNA test report, accusing Lydia of being a cuckoo in the nest. That day, she learned that they had been switched at birth. Cecily was the real daughter of the Jones family, while Lydia was supposed to be a village girl from a remote mountain area. Since the truth came out of guilt, Lydia had constantly yielded to Cecily. Whatever Cecily wanted, Lydia gave up. But then, Cecily set her sights on Ethan Grant. Lydia had thought the whole world might abandon her, but Ethan never would. Yet, he changed too. Time and again, he stood by Cecily's side, caring for her, protecting her. The first time, he asked Lydia to give her birthday gift to Cecily. The third time, he asked her to give her thesis credit to Cecily. The 99th time, he even asked her to give up her government-sponsored fellowship spot to Cecily. Disappointment had been accumulating, but this time she couldn't hold it back. She had exploded in anger at him for the first time. He knew perfectly well how important this fellowship was to her. It was something she had fought for through countless days and nights. With the country's medical field still developing, her dream was to learn advanced techniques abroad and return to build up the nation and save more lives. He knew her ambitions, yet he still went behind her back to cross out her name for Cecily's sake. If Cecily hadn't gloated in front of her, she would still be in the dark. In that moment, her heart died completely, and she made a deal with Cecily. She would give Ethan Grant to Cecily, and Cecily would return the spot to her. Seeing Lydia remain silent for a long time, Cecily narrowed her eyes, walked up a few steps, and shoved Lydia. I'm talking to you, Lydia snapped back to reality and handed the signed mandatory divorce agreement she had prepared earlier to Cecily. I have already applied for a mandatory divorce through the legal department. It will take a month to process. In 1 month, I will leave on my own. Cecily glanced at the agreement, frowning deeply. Is this fake? How could you get a divorce approval alone? Fake. Others might not be able to, but she, Lydia Jones, could. When she married Ethan, Elder Grant had given her a family crest. With this crest, the people Elder Grant knew would grant her one unconditional request. That was why she could apply for the divorce so smoothly. Her gaze was calm. Look at it closely. Can this be faked? Cecily scrutinized the agreement for a long time. Upon realizing it was indeed genuine, she relaxed and turned to leave. By the way, I forgot to tell you, Lydia spoke suddenly. Cecily stopped and looked back. Lydia said meaningfully, although I've applied for a mandatory divorce, this was a marriage arranged by the elders. Without a major issue, divorce isn't easily granted. If news of the divorce leaks out, you and Ethan won't have a chance. So you'd best endure and stay quiet for now. I will leave automatically when the time comes. Cecily opened her mouth to speak, but a male voice suddenly cut in. Who is leaving? The man's face was handsome yet sharp, his eyes gentle but carrying an imposing aura. It was Ethan Grant, Lydia's husband of 3 years. Lydia put the agreement into her bag and changed the subject. Nothing. Aren't you working right now? Why are you back suddenly? Ethan walked towards them, glancing at Cecily beside him. Ceci said she wanted to taste the pastries from that bakery uptown. They close early, so I came back early to buy them for her. He handed the box in his hand to Cecily. Cecily's eyes lit up. She took the pastries happily and hugged them. Brother-in-law, you're the best. I just mentioned it casually. I didn't expect you to skip work just to bring them to me. Lydia lowered her eyes, hiding the fleeting mockery in them. In the past, he would take detours to bring her favorite snacks, but he had never skipped work specifically for her like he did for Cecily. Seeing Cecily's joy, the corners of Ethan's mouth turned up slightly. Suddenly remembering something, he looked hesitantly at Lydia. Lydia, Ceci has been back for so long and hasn't seen a movie yet, so I bought 2 tickets to take her. Hearing this, the smile on Cecily's face became even more pronounced. Yes, Big L, I've lived a hard life since childhood and haven't seen these rare city things. That's why I begged my brother-in-law to take me. You won't be angry, right? At the end, Cecily deliberately emphasized her tone, carrying a hint of provocation. What did Lydia have to be angry about? She had already exhausted her anger long ago. Besides, she was practically divorced. Now, she only hoped to leave quickly and cut ties with these people. She glanced up slightly at Cecily. It's fine. You two go ahead. In the past, when mentioning going out with Cecily, although Lydia would nod in agreement, she would still be somewhat sad. Her calmness this time stunned Ethan for a moment. But beside him, Cecily couldn't wait to pull on his sleeve to leave. He didn't look at Lydia again and turned to leave. Under the sunlight, Cecily held Ethan's hand, walking cheerfully and chattering nonstop while he occasionally lowered his head to reply to her. Lydia watched until the two disappeared from her sight, then walked straight towards the hospital. As soon as she entered the hospital, she was stunned by the scene before her. Countless colleagues stood in the hallway. Seeing her appear, they immediately filled her arms with flowers and letters. Dr. Jones, we heard the fellowship list is finalized. It's you, congratulations. Congratulations, this is wonderful news. Lydia hadn't expected the news of her deployment to spread so fast. Looking at her colleagues sincerely happy for her, her heart warmed. Her long-suppressed spirit finally felt completely relaxed and free in this moment. Thank you everyone back in her office. Lydia carefully placed the flowers and letters on her desk. Her gaze involuntarily drifted to the photo frame on the side. In it, she and Ethan were snuggling closely, their faces full of happy smiles. Their wedding had been low-key, and not many people were invited. Since they were both attractive, they had many admirers. So, after discussing it with Ethan, to avoid trouble, they each placed a photo of them together on their desks to tell everyone they were taken. Every day in the past, she would carefully wipe the photo frame, her heart sweet as honey every time she saw it. But now, she just glanced at it indifferently, then raised her hand and unhesitatingly threw the frame into the trash can beside her in the evening. After Lydia finished consulting with the last patient, she took her satchel from the wall and walked out. Upon returning to the courtyard, Lydia immediately saw 2 extra people on the sofa. Cecily was sitting next to Martha Jones, saying something that made Martha smile continuously, while Ethan sat on the side, watching the mother and daughter with a smile. Lydia walked over. Mom, why are you here? Martha's smiling face instantly turned cold upon seeing her. She turned her head away. Conversely, Cecily quickly stood up and called out, Big L. Martha pulled Cecily back, her tone full of dissatisfaction. Why are you calling a thief your sister? If it weren't for her, would you have suffered for so many years? Lydia had heard this countless times over the past 6 months, so she didn't care at all. She walked directly to sit next to Ethan. Perhaps feeling that Martha's words were harsh, Ethan frowned and held her hand. Lydia, Mom doesn't mean that. Don't take it to heart. It should have passed like that, but Martha was relentless. She pointed at Lydia and scolded, What do you mean I didn't mean that? I meant exactly that I'm telling you if it weren't for the switch back then. You would be the one sleeping in a shed and eating scraps every time you see Ceci. You should slap yourself in apology. What right did you have to live the good life in her place for so many years? Perhaps remembering Cecily's emaciated appearance when she first returned, Martha's words became increasingly ugly. Lydia lowered her eyes and let Martha scold her. She wouldn't have to listen to it for much longer anyway. After scolding for who knows how long, Martha finally felt satisfied. She took a sip of water from her cup before stating her purpose. She glared at Lydia, then changed her expression to look at Ethan. "Ethan, Ceci's dad, and I have to go out of town for something. We're worried about leaving Ceci home alone, so we were thinking of having her stay at your place for a while. What do you think?" Ethan didn't answer but instinctively looked at Lydia beside him. "Lydia? Sure." Ethan had prepared persuasive arguments, but before he could speak, Lydia agreed readily. Her decisiveness stunned him for a moment. He felt an inexplicable strangeness in his heart, feeling she shouldn't have reacted this way. But before he could figure it out, Martha stood up. "In that case, her father and I can rest easy." Martha patted Cecily's hand with reluctance. "It just so happens Ethan knows about the procedures for studying abroad. If you have any questions, you can ask him." Cecily froze slightly upon hearing this. She glanced covertly at Lydia, then held Martha's arm and acted coyly. "Mom, I thought about it and decided not to go abroad. I gave the spot to someone else. After all, I just came back to the family. I want to spend more time with you guys. Is that okay?" A trace of surprise flashed across Martha's face, but she said nothing. Even Ethan didn't ask further, only adding, "As long as you're happy." Lydia watched the harmonious trio, her eyes dimming, a touch of self-mockery in their depths. The fellowship spot she had worked so hard to get was treated like a common object in their eyes, tossed around casually. Late at night, Lydia and Ethan took Cecily upstairs to choose a room. Before Lydia could speak, Cecily immediately set her sights on their wedding room. "I like this one, brother-in-law. Can I stay in this room?" Ethan looked at the wedding room, his Adam's apple bobbing. Just as he was about to speak, Cecily's eyes instantly turned red. She lowered her head and tugged at the corner of her clothes. "Brother-in-law, you know I lived in a dark and damp room growing up, so I want to live in a room with sunlight. I really like this one." At the end, she looked up at him carefully, tears threatening to fall from the corners of her eyes. "Then you stay in this room?" Ethan's heart softened instantly. Cecily cheered and excitedly hung onto his neck. In her inadvertent glance at Lydia, there was a vague hint of triumph. "Thank you, brother-in-law," Ethan looked at her dotingly, but then suddenly thinking of something, he pulled her arms down and turned to look at Lydia beside him. "Lydia, don't mind it. Ceci suffered a lot growing up. Just yield to her a little more." Lydia just twitched the corners of her lips. What did she have to mind? She had given up her husband, what was a room. That night, Lydia went to sleep early. Soon, Ethan finished washing up and got into bed. He didn't go straight to sleep. Instead, he reached out and pulled Lydia into his arms. When his hot breath landed on her neck, she woke up with a start and pushed him away slightly. But Ethan seemed not to notice. Tiny kisses trailed from her neck to her collarbone. While kissing her, he reached for the drawer to get protection. Lydia was about to say she wasn't interested, but the next moment, Ethan's voice changed slightly. "What is this?" She sat up immediately and saw her fellowship application lying quietly in the drawer. Ethan frowned and instinctively reached to pick it up to look closely when a sudden scream broke the atmosphere. "Biggie, help!" It came from Cecily's room next door. Ethan rushed out instinctively, not even putting on his slippers. Lydia looked at the empty spot on the bed for a long while before lowering her eyes and smiling, hiding the self-mockery and cold irony in her eyes. Then she turned to get out of bed and moved the application to a different location. Lydia wrapped herself in a blanket and walked to Cecily's room. Just as she was about to knock, she froze at the scene inside. Ethan was half kneeling on the floor, massaging medicine onto Cecily's sprained ankle, which rested on his leg. His eyes were gentle and helpless. Every time Cecily moaned in pain, he lightened his touch. Although he didn't look up, his voice was full of concern. "Is this pressure okay?" In a trance, Lydia suddenly remembered a long time ago, he used to apply medicine and massage her just as gently. The hand resting on the doorframe ultimately didn't knock. She returned to her room, lay on the bed staring at the ceiling, sleep completely gone. The room was so quiet she could hear her own heartbeat, and the faint moans of Cecily and Ethan's coaxing voice from the other side of the wall. The hour hand on the wall clock went round and round. Hearing the door open, she quickly closed her eyes. Ethan walked in and saw Lydia sleeping with her back to him. The open drawer no longer contained the document he hadn't seen clearly. His eyes were full of thoughts, feeling like he had overlooked something. They had a dreamless night. Lydia rubbed her sore neck and went downstairs, only to see two figures already in the kitchen. The usually cool and proper Ethan was skillfully tossing a wok, while Cecily exclaimed in admiration from the side. After the breakfast was plated, Ethan habitually picked up a piece of egg with his hand and fed it to Cecily. "Taste it, see if it suits your palate." Cecily smiled shyly, stood on tiptoes, and bit the egg in his hand. When her lips parted, she seemed to accidentally touch his fingers. Both froze for a moment, then quickly acted as if nothing happened. Turning with the breakfast, they saw Lydia standing on the stairs. Ethan opened his mouth to say something, but Lydia sat at the dining table as if she hadn't seen anything. After breakfast, as Ethan cleared the dishes, he looked at her apologetically. "Lydia, I promised to go on a date with you today, but something came up. Can we go next time?" Lydia didn't care if he had time or not. She had plans with other colleagues today anyway. Not long after Ethan left, Cecily also found an excuse to go out. In the state-run restaurant, Lydia sat with her colleagues. While waiting for the food, everyone chatted. Somehow, the topic of her going abroad came up, and an atmosphere of reluctance spread. "Once you leave, we don't know when we'll meet again." Lydia smiled and comforted them. "We can write letters. Just give me your addresses." "What addresses?" Ethan's voice suddenly rang out from behind her. Everyone turned to see him standing behind them with Cecily. Everyone quickly greeted him. "We were just talking about Lydia going abroad." Lydia quickly stopped her colleague from revealing the truth with a look and shook her head slightly. "Nothing. Didn't you say you were busy?" Hearing this, he looked at Cecily beside him, his tone carrying a hint of indulgence. "Ceci hasn't eaten the food here, so I took special leave to bring her." "Special leave?" Lydia smiled self-deprecatingly. She raised her eyes to look at Cecily holding his arm, then quickly looked away. Cecily, however, was full of triumph and feigned kindness. "Big L, since fate brought us together, let's share a table and eat together." Before Lydia could refuse, Cecily sat down with Ethan. Soon, various exquisite dishes were served, the aroma overflowing. Everyone started eating. Only Ethan didn't move much. Instead, he devoted himself to taking care of Cecily. Peeling shrimp, pouring water, handing napkins. A series of familiar actions gave Lydia an illusion, as if they were the married couple. Even bystanders noticed something was wrong and said sarcastically, "Commander Grant, you and Lydia's sister are really close, aren't you?" As if she didn't understand the implication, Cecily smiled sweetly and spoke first. "He's my brother-in-law, of course we're close. Right, brother-in-law?" Ethan carefully placed the peeled shrimp into Cecily's bowl before softly humming an affirmative. Perhaps benefiting from Ethan's bias, Cecily became more and more presumptuous, eventually even asking Ethan to wipe her mouth. Lydia looked at the food in her bowl and suddenly lost her appetite, leaving the table early. Perhaps sensing Lydia's displeasure, Ethan quickly chased after her and grabbed her hand. Lydia frowned, not understanding what he was doing, but she couldn't break free after several attempts, so she had to let him lead her forward, leaving Cecily looking embarrassed behind them. "Sir, buy a gift for your beloved." A child with a tray hanging around his neck walked up to them, displaying various small gifts on the tray. Ethan, who usually disliked such things, stopped suddenly. "This one." Ethan picked up a small necklace and paid, then handed it to Lydia. "Lydia, this necklace matches your dress." Lydia's expression was calm as she looked at him quietly. Ethan felt a tremor in his heart and actively put the necklace around her neck. Then looking at his watch, he said his leave time was almost up and asked the two of them to go back first. On the way back, as soon as Lydia got in the car, she took off the necklace. She looked out the window without speaking, missing the dark, jealous gaze Cecily cast at her. After arriving home, Lydia tossed the necklace onto the cabinet and headed for her room, but Cecily grabbed her wrist from behind. "Lydia Jones, about the fellowship, I have some things to tell you. Let's talk in my room." Involving the fellowship, Lydia didn't suspect anything. She hummed an assent and turned to walk towards Cecily's room, missing Cecily's vicious smile. Bang! The moment Lydia entered the room, the door was slammed shut. She instinctively turned around, and a scent of flowers rushed into her nose. Lydia froze. She was severely allergic to pollen. Moreover, this room was full of flowers soon. Red bumps began to appear on her neck and arms, and her breathing became rapid. Scratching her neck, she ran to the door to open it quickly. But the door was locked from the outside by Cecily. Cecily Jones, what are you doing? Let me out, Cecily's voice, full of jealousy and unwillingness, rang from outside. What am I doing? I want you to leave immediately. Lydia's vision went black. She knelt on the ground with a thud, her breathing growing weaker, but she forced herself to stay conscious. I already told you, as soon as I get the divorce certificate, I'll leave. I'm allergic to pollen, let me out quickly. Don't even think about it, Cecily's tone became colder. Did you know? Every day you stay here, Brother Ethan won't look at me. Isn't he fond of you? Then call him and ask him to come back and save you. With that, Cecily turned and left, disregarding Lydia's life or death. Cecily, seeing the noise outside fading, a chill rose from Lydia's bones. Cecily clearly wanted her dead. She forced herself to calm down, gathered all her strength, picked up a chair nearby, and smashed it against the door. Once, twice. The sturdy door remained undamaged. She knelt on the ground again, covering her nose and mouth, breathing carefully. But the pervasive pollen still rushed into her nose through her fingers. There was a dance today. At this hour, everyone in the compound had probably gone to watch the excitement. Otherwise, it was impossible that no one came to check despite the noise she made. Now the only spare key was with Ethan. She forced herself to crawl to the landline to call Ethan. 1 call, 2 calls, 3 calls, 10 calls, call after call, but no one answered on the other end. Her heart grew colder, tears streaming down uncontrollably. Ethan, answer the phone, why won't you answer? She couldn't die here. She hadn't fulfilled her dream yet. Just a second before she was about to pass out, the phone was finally picked up. Hello, hearing the familiar voice, Lydia clutched the receiver tightly as if grabbing onto hope. Ethan, Lydia, I'm with Ceci. Whatever it is, talk later. Beep. The phone was abruptly hung up by him instantly. Lydia collapsed to the ground as if losing all strength. Bang! She forced her body up again, picking up the chair and smashing the door again and again, screaming. Someone, help finally. A neighbor who had returned to the compound to get something heard the noise, rushed upstairs, and broke the lock. The moment the door opened, Lydia could no longer hold on and collapsed. 2 days later, Lydia opened her eyes with difficulty. Smelling the disinfectant, she realized she was in the hospital. Beside her, Ethan was slumped by the bed, holding her hand tightly. She instinctively tried to pull her hand back. The movement made him look up abruptly. Their eyes met, and a look of joy appeared on the man's face. Lydia, you're finally awake. Although his words were excited, his eyes were bloodshot, stubble covered his chin, and he was full of exhaustion. Such concern and care made it seem as if he still loved her deeply, as he did during their honeymoon phase. But her mind was filled with the scene of him hanging up her phone to keep Cecily company. Lydia yanked her hand back, turning her head away, not wanting to see him. Looking at his empty hand, Ethan stiffened. Thinking of that day, he explained with guilt. Lydia, that day Ceci sprained her ankle and came to find me. She was crying hard. I was in a rush to help her treat it. I really didn't know about your situation. Remembering that while she called for help, he was accompanying Cecily, a chill rose from her heart. Not anger, but despair. She had long given up hope on him, yet he still managed to hurt her so deeply. Lydia looked at him and couldn't help but expose Cecily's true face. She was crying hard? Ethan, do you know who locked me in that room? It was Cecily. She locked me in a room full of flowers, then sprained her own ankle to find you. She's such a good actress. It's a pity to bury her talent here. She thought that after hearing this, Ethan would at least change his view of Cecily. But he showed a complex emotion, turning to hold her hand. Lydia, Ceci already explained it to me before this. She didn't know you were allergic to pollen. She just wanted to play a little prank on you. She didn't expect it to be this serious. She's very sad now, don't blame her. A little prank? Lydia turned her head sharply. She never expected him to say such words to exonerate Cecily. He knew clearly that she was severely allergic to pollen and that this incident almost cost her life, but he insisted on brushing it off with the words, little prank. Her body began to tremble involuntarily. Seeing her shaking, Ethan thought she was having aftereffects. He comforted her while pressing the bell to call the nurse. The nurse rushed in, but not to check on her. Instead, she looked anxiously at Ethan. Commander Grant, Miss Cecily suddenly fainted. Please go check on her. Ethan's face changed, and he stood up immediately. Suddenly remembering something, he looked back at Lydia on the bed. Lydia, Ceci fainted from guilt over this matter. Don't take it to heart anymore. Lydia opened her mouth in disbelief, wanting to say something, but he had already rushed out of the ward. Finally, she gave a bitter smile and closed her eyes. After that day, Lydia didn't see Ethan again, only occasionally hearing a few sentences from the nurses. After Cecily fainted, Ethan guarded her incessantly. He fed her medicine, carried her out of bed, and even coaxed her to sleep. The nurse was new and didn't know Ethan was Lydia's husband, so her words implied envy that Cecily had such a good husband. Lydia didn't explain. There was no need. Now, she just quietly waited for that day, waiting for the divorce agreement to take effect, the day she could completely stay away from Ethan Grant. The day before Lydia was discharged, the ward suddenly became lively. It turned out that Ethan hadn't gone back for a few days, and people asked around to find out he was at the hospital taking care of Lydia. So, they came with fruit to visit her. Hearing their words, Lydia thought Ethan was indeed taking care of someone, but not her, it was Cecily. Everyone chatted happily and mentioned the surprise Ethan had prepared recently. Lydia, you and the commander are truly the most loving couple in our compound. Not long ago, the commander specifically asked girls what gifts they like. Moreover, he organized a fireworks show. It must be prepared for you. Fireworks? She never liked fireworks. It seemed the owner of these fireworks was someone else. Suddenly, the door was pushed open. Seeing Ethan appear, everyone immediately teased. Speak of the devil. Commander, we accidentally spilled the beans about your surprise. Come tell Lydia yourself? Yes, you have to be the one to announce this surprise. Everyone laughingly pushed Ethan towards Lydia, then thoughtfully closed the door and left. Lydia's lips curled into an arc, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. I heard them say you prepared fireworks for me? Ethan's tall and straight body stiffened. After a long while, he said, No, those fireworks are a birthday surprise for Ceci. This is her first birthday since coming back, so naturally, it has to be grand. After speaking, as if afraid she would be angry, he leaned over to hold her hand. Lydia, don't be angry, She calmly moved her hand away and leaned back against the soft headboard. What do I have to be angry about? We are already. The word divorced wasn't spoken in the end. Already what? She shook her head, changing the subject, her tone calm. With parents away, you are her brother-in-law. Naturally, you have to prepare a birthday party for her. I have nothing to be angry about. Seeing her being so reasonable, Ethan's eyes relaxed. A week later, Cecily's birthday arrived. Ethan organized it very carefully and grandly. Lydia stood at the door, looking at the exquisitely decorated courtyard. Colorful lights were hung everywhere, gifts were piled up, and a 2-meter-tall cake stood in the center of the yard. In a corner sat a world-renowned orchestra, rehearsing Cecily's favorite tunes. She lowered her eyes, hiding the faint irony within. The lights dimmed. Amidst melodious violin music, Cecily, wearing a gown custom made by Ethan, held his arm and slowly walked down the stairs, garnering countless admiring looks. Throughout the banquet, Ethan stayed by her side. He danced the opening dance with her, cut the cake with her, and watched the fireworks side by side with her, until the bell rang and the guests dispersed. Finally getting a moment of quiet after a bustling day, Lydia turned to go upstairs to wash up. Brother-in-law, a sudden noise broke the tranquility. She looked towards the source. She saw Cecily stopping Ethan at the gate as he was about to come in to find Lydia. Cecily grabbed the corner of his clothes, her eyes full of expectation, yet carrying a hint of shyness. Brother-in-law, didn't you say since it's my birthday you can fulfill all my requests? I have a request. I want you to kiss me. Hearing this, Ethan's face instantly went pale. What nonsense are you talking about? He pushed her away and walked straight into the living room. Brother-in-law, panic flashed in Cecily's eyes. Disregarding everything else, she hugged his waist tightly, pressing against him, her voice trembling. Today is my birthday. I only have this one small wish. Can't you fulfill it? Seeming afraid he would leave, her voice was tainted with a sob. Ethan frowned. Just as he was about to speak, Lydia, who had been watching everything from upstairs, suddenly spoke up. Cecily is the birthday girl. Since you promised her, you should keep your word. A kiss is nothing. As soon as these words came out, the two entangled people looked at her in shock. Ethan didn't understand why she would say such a thing. Previously, she loved him the most. If he even got close to another girl, she would sulk and be jealous for days. But now, she seemed indifferent to everything. She even actively told him to kiss someone else, her face as plain as if she were watching a movie unrelated to her. His heart panicked inexplicably, unsure if he was panicking over her reaction or the various anomalies he had noticed recently. Hearing Lydia agree, Cecily's dim eyes suddenly brightened. She hugged him even tighter. "Brother-in-law, I don't mean anything else. I suffered so much before and never felt family love. I just want to feel family affection. Didn't Big L agree?" Tears wet his shirt. Seeing him still unmoved, Cecily cried louder and louder. Finally, Ethan turned around, cupped her face, and placed a light kiss on her forehead. "There, I kissed you. Stop crying." After this kiss, Cecily seemed to have received some special permission and began to cling to Ethan even more. Until a week later, Ethan used the excuse of Mr. and Mrs. Jones returning to send Cecily away, finally getting time alone with Lydia. Ethan peeled fruit and handed it to her, speaking cautiously. "Lydia, is there anywhere you want to go? I happen to be free and can go with you." Happens to be free? Lydia curled her lips. She hadn't heard that phrase in a long time, especially since Cecily returned. All his free time was given to Cecily. She didn't take the apple from his hand. Instead, she bent down, pulled a photo album from the drawer under the table, opened it, and pointed to a few photos. "Let's go to these places." He leaned in to look and realized the places she pointed to were all the spots they dated before getting married. "Why do you suddenly want to go to these places?" Lydia put the album back in the drawer. "No reason, just suddenly felt like it." She wouldn't tell Ethan that before she left, she wanted to erase all the memories they had left behind. As the first rays of morning sunlight rose, Lydia sat in Ethan's car, driving towards their first date spot. The moment she got into the passenger seat, she froze. The entire dashboard was filled with girls' trinkets, from a lipstick to a jacket, obviously Cecily's things. Ethan saw them too and instinctively moved to remove them. "No need." Lydia buckled her seatbelt and stopped him calmly. That seat would be Cecily's exclusively, in the future anyway. Soon they arrived at the first location, a temple in the north of the city. Though small, the Lovers' Bridge in front of the temple was exceptionally popular. Many couples would come here to hang a concentric love lock. It was said that couples who hung a lock here would never separate. When they were most in love, Ethan had brought her here to hang one. Tourists on the bridge were endless. Protected by Ethan's side, she walked towards where they had hung the lock. After years of wind and rain, the writing on the lock was long blurred. But Lydia could still see the solemnity Ethan had when hanging the lock. He had kissed her repeatedly, saying they would be locked together for life, never to separate. After speaking, he had thrown the only key off the cliff. Coming back to reality, she took a pair of pliers from her pocket and snapped the lock shackle, severing their decade-long love just like the lock. "Lydia, what are you doing?" Watching the love lock being cut and falling off the cliff, Ethan's heart shook violently. He rushed forward to stop her but missed. He could only watch it fall. She put away the pliers and spoke calmly. "I heard old locks are bad for relationships, so I cut it." Ethan looked at her calm eyes, feeling panicked. He quickly suggested hanging a new one, but she turned to walk down the mountain. "Let's talk about it later." Next, they went to the second place, the third place, the fourth place. At every spot, Lydia used the same excuse to destroy the evidence of their love one by one. Ethan didn't understand what she was doing, only instinctively feeling she was still angry about Cecily. To make her happy, he took her to the department store to choose gifts. The mall was bustling. Ethan protected Lydia as they walked, considerately carrying bags for her. "Lydia, is there anything else you want to buy?" Although Lydia maintained an indifferent appearance, Ethan seemed determined to make amends, buying everything he saw with a wave of his hand. Within a short time, his hands were full of shopping bags. Lydia shook her head. Just as she was about to speak, her gaze suddenly froze on someone ahead. The next second, a petite figure rushed over and threw herself into Ethan's arms. Brother Ethan was nearly knocked back a few steps. When he steadied himself, he saw Cecily lifting her head from his chest, looking pleasantly surprised. "Brother Ethan, you're really so good to me. I just casually mentioned liking these things that day. I didn't expect you to buy them for me immediately." He was stunned. Just as he wanted to say something, he saw Lydia walking forward without looking back. "Lydia," Ethan instinctively wanted to chase after her, but Cecily kept entangled with him. "Ceci," he warned in a low voice, "this is a mall." Seeing people around looking at them, Cecily pouted in dissatisfaction and let go of his neck. For the rest of the trip, wherever Lydia and Ethan went, Cecily followed closely. Lydia walked alone on one side, while Cecily held Ethan's arm on the other, chattering nonstop. Ethan replied occasionally, but his gaze remained on Lydia. Cecily grew increasingly dissatisfied. Just as she was about to speak, a scream was heard, "Run, there's a madman killing people." She turned sideways and saw a disheveled lunatic holding a bundle of dynamite rushing straight towards them instantly. The scene turned chaotic. People fled in all directions, crying and screaming. "Go!" Ethan reacted quickly, pushing Lydia and Cecily towards the exit, then prepared to pounce on the attacker. But a scream came from behind. "Brother Ethan," Ethan paused and looked back, seeing Cecily fallen at the exit, looking at him with fear. "My ankle is sprained. Brother Ethan, save me, I don't want to die." In his moment of hesitation, the madman lit the fuse and threw the dynamite. Get down, faced with immense panic, many people froze in place. Only after Ethan's shout did they react. Lydia also reacted quickly. But as she fell, she watched helplessly as Ethan bypassed her and leaped towards Cecily, who was actually closer to the safety exit. Boom! The explosion was deafening. Flames and smoke shot into the sky, the air filled with a suffocating pungent smell. Amidst successive muffled sounds mixed with piercing whistles, the earth seemed to shake. Scorching flames darted everywhere, smoke billowed, and panicked people ran like headless flies, shouting and crying. The noise reaching the heavens, the massive impact shockwave blackened Lydia's vision, and she collapsed weakly to the ground. Seeing Ethan struggle up and pick up Cecily to leave, in the moment between life and death, she instinctively shouted. Ethan, his steps paused, but he didn't look back. Crack! She looked up. A beam from the ceiling was crashing straight down towards her back. When she woke up again, Lydia found herself lying prone on a hospital bed, an IV drip in her left hand. She instinctively struggled to sit up, but accidentally pulled at the wound on her back. "Don't move," Ethan prevented her. "Lydia, you have a wound on your back, don't agitate it." After the doctor finished checking, Ethan finally breathed a sigh of relief. Avoiding her injury, he held her, constantly saying sorry. His voice was full of heartache and trembling. "Lydia, I'm really sorry. I had a reason for saving Ceci first. I know you've suffered a lot of grievances recently, but I did it for a reason. I can't say it now, but when the time comes, I will explain everything to you clearly. Don't be mad at me, okay?" Lydia was held tight by him. Her eyes were cold. After a pause, she smiled self-deprecatingly. "Reason? What reason could there be?" She coldly extended her hand and pushed him away, turning to lie on her other side. "I'm tired and want a rest. If you have nothing else, please leave." Looking at her indifferent expression, panic welled up in Ethan's heart. He instinctively reached out to hug her. "Lydia!" The next second, the door was shoved open. Ethan, "Ceci is refusing to take her medicine and making a fuss. Go check on her quickly." Martha Jones rushed in, grabbing his sleeve to pull him out. "Mom, I need to take care of Lydia." This was the first time Ethan refused Martha. He looked at Lydia, whose entire back was wrapped in bandages, his eyes full of distress, refusing to leave. Martha instantly flew into a rage. "Why care about her? She won't die. Ceci is crying so hard she's about to faint. You go check on her immediately." Saying this, she pushed him towards the outside again. Ethan looked hesitant, his tone tentatively careful. "Lydia, don't worry about me. Go handle your business." A calm voice came from behind. Ethan looked at Lydia's indifferent demeanor, feeling increasingly uneasy, as if once he left they would have no future. Martha didn't wait for him to recover, pushing him out of the ward. Bang! The door closed tight. Lydia opened her eyes, staring blankly at the birds flying past the window, silently counting the days. Soon, very soon, she could leave completely. The day Lydia was discharged happened to be the last day for the agreement to take effect. Ethan had been taking care of Cecily these past few days and hadn't visited Lydia, so he didn't know that the first thing she did after discharge was go to the registry to pick up the divorce certificate. Looking at the divorce certificate in hand, she revealed a smile of liberation, feeling her heart lighter than ever before. Returning home, the Department of Health called to say the group for the fellowship would depart today. Good news comes in pairs. Lydia couldn't wait to pack her luggage. Just as she zipped up the suitcase with everything packed, the landline beside her rang. She stood for a long time, never thinking of answering it, even though she was standing right next to it, but the person on the other end didn't give up, calling again and again. Finally, she picked up the receiver. "Hello." Her calm tone contrasted sharply with Ethan's panic on the other end. "Lydia, why were you discharged suddenly? Isn't your injury not healed yet?" Lydia's tone was flat. "I'm a doctor. I know if my injury is healed." Perhaps realizing this, he fell silent for a moment, not asking further, just saying, "Lydia, wait for me at home. I'll be back right away." "No need, you're busy. Go take care of Cecily." She had been hospitalized for so long without him coming back to care for her. One day didn't matter. "No, Cecily's injury is healed. She doesn't need my care anymore." His tone carried a rare panic. "I told you before I would explain everything. Wait for me, I'll come back right away to explain clearly." Bang, she hung up the phone mercilessly. Lydia smiled lightly, sarcasm filling her eyes. The divorce was done, explaining was useless. Besides, with everything that happened recently, she didn't know what Ethan could possibly explain. Late at night, she placed the divorce certificate belonging to Ethan on the table and walked out of the courtyard, resolutely dragging her luggage. When she first moved into this home, she was full of expectation. But in the end, she left covered in scars. From now on, she was no longer Ethan Grant's wife, no longer an object he could discard at will. She was just herself, just Lydia Jones. She no longer loved him and would never look back for him. As the sky gradually brightened and the first sunlight shone into the courtyard, it was already empty. Just as Lydia thought, Ethan couldn't come back at all. Because just as he was hung up on and about to rush out of the hospital, a scream came from behind. "Ceci, calm down, don't do anything foolish." Ethan, come quick." Disregarding everything else, Ethan rushed into Cecily's ward. He saw Cecily sitting on the windowsill, teetering dangerously, seeing Ethan. She became even more agitated. "Brother Ethan, why were you gone when I woke up? Didn't you say you'd stay with me? I know you still have my sister in your heart, but what about me?" Cecily grew more excited as she spoke, tears streaming down. "When you treated my wound, you saw my body. The whole hospital knows. If you don't want me, how can I live saying this?" Cecily moved to jump. "Ceci," Martha cried out shrilly, looking about to faint. "Ceci," Ethan's pupils shrank. He rushed over, pulled her down, and held her firmly in his arms. Let me go, let me die. If I die, you and Big L can live happily ever after." Cecily struggled harder, and his face grew grimmer, but he didn't let go. "Ceci, stop talking nonsense." After some persuasion, Cecily finally calmed down. He carried her back to the bed, finally clearing his thoughts. "Ceci, I saved you then purely out of instinct as a man. Your wound was severely infected. If not treated in time, you would have died. But you held onto me tightly and wouldn't let go, so the doctor and I had to cut the clothes off your back. But I didn't look the whole time. It was better left unsaid." Once he spoke, Cecily became agitated again, but he held her down. "Ceci, listen to me first, okay? In this era, people were still somewhat conservative about these things. Sometimes serious cases required the rescuer to take responsibility, or they might be sent to a labor camp for reform. But firstly, he was a man and saving lives was a duty. Secondly, he was married. His marriage to Lydia was arranged by elders and couldn't be dissolved without major issues. Besides, he and Lydia had always had a good relationship. How could they divorce? Yes, Miss Jones, if Commander Grant hadn't risked his life to save you, you might not have survived. In matters of life and death, who counts these things? The doctors and nurses who entered also helped persuade. Internally, they were scornful. What kind of logic was this? If seeing a body while saving someone meant taking responsibility, then shouldn't all doctors and nurses have to marry their patients? Who would be willing to save lives then? Persuaded by them, Cecily gradually dropped the idea of forcing Ethan to take responsibility. It was just her being too impatient. Since Lydia divorced him anyway, her being with him was just a matter of time. Thinking of Lydia, hatred flashed in her eyes again. If not for Lydia, why would she be in this state? Seeing Cecily calm down, Ethan sighed in relief, but he dismissed the idea of going home. If Cecily had another accident after he left, Lydia would definitely be sad. After all, she was Lydia's sister. Thinking of this after Cecily fell asleep, he went to the stairwell. quietly called the butler, and asked him to go home and tell Lydia not to wait for him tonight. He would return in a few days. As for Lydia being angry, that was impossible. In all their years of love, he had never seen her angry. "By the way, tell the madam to have the housekeeper pack a few sets of clothes for me." Because of the scene she just caused, Cecily's condition worsened, and she had to stay in the hospital for a few more days, so he could only stay here to accompany her. Watching the security guard leave, Ethan stood dazed for a while before quietly walking towards Cecily's ward. But before he could knock, Cecily's triumphant voice came from inside. "Mom, don't worry. Brother Ethan will definitely marry me. After all, Lydia divorced him long ago, Buzz." Ethan's mind went blank. What did Cecily say? Lydia divorced him? How did he not know? Just as he was about to push the door open to ask, the butler who had just returned home rushed over, holding something in his hand. "Commander, the madam is gone." Ignoring the people inside, Ethan strode over, his face gloomy. "What nonsense are you talking about?" The butler tremblingly handed him the item, swallowing hard. "As soon as I entered the house, I found it empty, no one there. I only saw this divorce certificate on the table." Ignoring everything else, Ethan snatched the divorce certificate. Opening it, his single photo stared back at him, and the certificate bore the official seal of the Civil Affairs Bureau. This proved the divorce certificate was real. His vision went black, and he stumbled back onto the chair behind him, his hand holding the certificate trembling uncontrollably. How could it be? How could Lydia divorce him? She loved him so much, and how could she divorce him so easily behind his back? Clearly, without a major issue, they couldn't get a divorce. Suddenly, he remembered the crest his grandfather gave her at their wedding. As long as she held the crest, they would grant her one request. So she used that crest. More and more things intertwined, creating chaos in his mind. He gripped the certificate tighter and tighter, even drawing blood on his palm, but he seemed not to feel it, staring dead at the document. His heart was cold and desperate. When Cecily came out hearing the commotion, she saw this scene. When she saw the divorce certificate in his hand clearly, she was so happy she almost jumped. Lydia didn't lie to her. They really divorced. This meant she could finally become Ethan's wife. The more she thought, the more excited she got. She laughed secretly for a while before pinching her palm, putting away her smile, and pretending to run over anxiously, squatting beside him. "Brother Ethan, what's wrong?" She feigned concern, looking at the man before her, but then acted as if she just discovered the certificate, covering her mouth. "Heavens, did my sister divorce you?" Cecily finished speaking and looked up, meeting Ethan's icy eyes. It was evening now. The wind blowing through the hospital corridor carried a chill. Being looked at coldly by him, she couldn't help shivering. "Brother Ethan, what's wrong? I know my sister divorcing you is sudden, but for you, it's a good thing, a good thing?" His tone became even colder, but Cecily didn't notice and continued. "Yes, brother Ethan. If I hadn't been switched with Lydia back then, the one marrying you should have been me." The more she thought, the more aggrieved she felt, and the more she resented Lydia. Although her adoptive parents doted on her, they were strict about relationships. In this era, despite freedom of love, parents still valued arranged matches. The fiancé chosen for her was 12 years older. How could she be willing to marry an old man? So upon learning she wasn't biological, she secretly hid from her parents and ran away, entered the capital, found her biological parents, and saw the fiancé that originally belonged to her. Thinking of such a handsome fiancé becoming the fake daughter's husband, hatred rose in her heart. Why should a thief who stole her life live so well? So after returning home, Cecily couldn't stand seeing Lydia do well. Whatever Lydia liked, she had to snatch it all, naturally including Ethan Grant. Besides, he was hers to begin with. Thinking of this, she disregarded everything else and hugged him, her voice increasingly aggrieved. "Brother Ethan, clearly you like me too. Since she divorced you, why can't we be together?" He raised his hand and pushed Cecily away indifferently. "I don't like you. I am your brother-in-law. My heart only holds Lydia Jones. I never intended to have an affair with you. Even taking care of you was because of your sister." Cecily's face went pale, seeming not to understand his meaning. "Brother-in-law, what are you saying? How does your kindness to me come from her? Don't you like me? Otherwise, why would you kiss me so many times?" "Shut up." The man lost his former patience, stood up, and looked coldly at the person before him. "Those kisses." If you hadn't threatened suicide, how could I have kissed you? Since Cecily returned, Lydia had yielded step by step out of guilt. It pained him, so he thought to be nicer to Cecily, so Lydia would feel less guilty. So their family relationship could return to how it was before. But he never expected his kindness to cause Cecily to misunderstand that he liked her. Impossible. Cecily didn't believe it at all, shaking her head constantly, tears falling one after another. Ethan Grant, if you really don't like me, why accommodate me again and again? Why leave her repeatedly to save me? Dare you say this isn't love? Admit it, you just like me? Ethan looked down from above, his pitch-black eyes staring at her coldly. His eyes were full of mockery and a hint of regret. If he had known Cecily harbored such dirty thoughts about him, he wouldn't have been so nice to her no matter what. And he thought of the times he abandoned Lydia for her. Regret thickened in his heart. He had to find Lydia immediately and explain everything. Cecily Jones, I don't like you. I will forever just be your brother-in-law. There is no possibility for us. Saying this, he turned to leave, but Cecily rushed forward and hugged his waist tightly. Let go. Cecily ignored his warning, hugging tighter. No, Ethan Grant, I know you're going to find Lydia, but give up, you won't find her. She has been sent abroad for the fellowship. What did you say? Ethan turned in disbelief. Lydia was sent abroad, but he clearly remembered crossing Lydia's name off the list. And he didn't stop her from going, just because Cecily clamored to go abroad to see the world, to make Lydia feel less guilty. He gave her spot to Cecily, thinking he would submit her name for the next batch. Now she went herself, but where did she get the spot? His gaze suddenly fell on Cecily. He remembered Cecily saying she wasn't going and gave the spot to someone else. So Cecily gave the spot to Lydia. Perhaps sensing his gaze, Cecily smiled. Brother Ethan, Lydia offered the exchange herself. As long as I gave the spot to her, she would divorce you and let me have you. Ethan's mind went blank. He never imagined the root cause of everything was Lydia not wanting him anymore. When he saw the divorce certificate, he made many excuses for her, thinking that as long as she still had him in her heart, he would remove all obstacles to be with her again. But he never expected it was Lydia who actively discarded him. Why he looked up at the triumphant Cecily before him. A chill suddenly rose in his heart. Was it because of Cecily? Because Cecily and he were too close, so she got jealous and divorced him. It must be, so he pushed Cecily away and walked out, but a stern voice came from the end of the corridor. Halt, Grandpa! Ethan never expected that the reclusive elder Grant would come to the capital in anger because of his marriage. In the Grant family courtyard, Ethan knelt on the ground, his back covered in ferocious, bleeding wounds. Elder Grant threw the whip aside and sat on the chair, furious. You are determined to anger me to death. When they got married, Elder Grant gave Lydia a family crest, telling her to bring it to him if she encountered difficulties, and he would help her. In 3 years of marriage, Lydia never used that crest. Who would have thought the first time she used it was to apply for a mandatory divorce in Elder Grant's eyes? Lydia had always been docile and obedient. Now that she actively proposed divorce, the problem must lie with Ethan. After asking around, he found out what foolish things Ethan had done. You knew clearly that after Cecily returned, Lydia wasn't favored by the Jones family and had a hard time. As her husband, instead of defending your wife, you went to please her enemy. Pleasing her is one thing, but you didn't use your own interests. You insisted on using your wife's interests. What do you call this? Yes, Lydia indeed felt guilty towards Cecily because of the switch. But can she be blamed for that? And you, instead of comforting her, you forced her to yield everywhere. Are you her husband or Cecily's husband? Guilt. If you feel sorry for Cecily, divorce her yourself and go find Cecily. But look what you did, a married man, a brother-in-law, entangled with his own sister-in-law. If you aren't ashamed, I am finished. Elder Grant didn't look at him again, slamming the door as he left. Without my order, no one is allowed to let him out. Far away in Europe, Lydia didn't care about what was happening domestically, because she had a more important matter. She didn't expect that while being sent to Europe to study medicine, she would find her biological parents. Mrs. York held her long-lost daughter and cried uncontrollably. For over 20 years, Mrs. York never thought she would find her daughter in her lifetime. Lydia, now Willow York, also couldn't stop crying. She always thought her parents didn't like her after the switch, which was why they didn't come for her. Now she knew her biological parents had been looking for her all these years. but due to work reasons causing them to move to the US and Europe, they lost contact with the domestic side. It wasn't until the first medical exchange meeting that Mrs. York recognized her at a glance, and she learned she still had biological parents. From Mrs. York, she learned that when Cecily was wrongly taken to their home, they thought about returning the child. But the Jones family moved to the capital due to work transfer, and the Yorks had to go to the US, missing the opportunity. All these years, Mr. and Mrs. York treated Cecily exceptionally well, giving her whatever she wanted, except for the fiancé originally prepared for Willow. After all, Cecily wasn't blood-related, but they still selected a man of excellent family background and appearance for her. But Cecily overheard their conversation, thinking the fiancé prepared for Willow was for her. So she stole money from home and secretly went to the capital. Because she had enough money, Cecily didn't suffer at all on the way. The misery she sold to the Jones family was just because she didn't want to see Willow doing well. Mr. and Mrs. York were angry and anxious. Angry that, after raising Cecily for so many years, she remained ungrateful. If she really wanted to find her biological parents, they wouldn't have stopped her. Anxious that something might happen to her on the way to the capital. Originally, upon learning Cecily went to the capital, they thought of using the opportunity to find Willow back. But the organization sent a document requiring them to work in Europe for a period, causing them to miss the chance, leaving Willow to suffer so much in the Jones family. Speaking of this, Mrs. York cried again. Willow hugged her mother and comforted her through tears. "It's okay, Mom. Treat it as repaying her. From now on, we have no ties." Mrs. York still felt unjust for her. Her daughter suffered so much in the Jones family and was abandoned by her ex-husband. How could they turn the page so easily? But seeing the calm on her daughter's face, Mrs. York didn't say more. Another spring arrived. It was Willow York's second year of fellowship study in Europe. Watching her medical skills improve daily, the smile on her face became more evident. This meant she could save more people after returning home. Mr. and Mrs. York's work was also coming to an end, and they prepared to return to the capital with their daughter. The plane glided across the sky, and the family of 3 landed in the capital. Looking at the street scene she hadn't seen in a long time, a trace of trance flashed in Willow's eyes. In just 2 years, everything before her felt incredibly strange. Seeing her distracted, Mrs. York waved at her before she snapped back and got into the car. Because of the long journey, the exhausted family declined visits from relatives and friends after returning home, deferring gatherings to a later time. In her room, Willow lay on the bed thinking about her follow-up work. 2 years of study promoted her from a surgeon to chief of surgery. This meant she had to shoulder more responsibility and save more patients. Also, the butler mentioned that Elder Grant hadn't been in good health these years and had been recuperating in the hospital. If she went to the hospital, she was destined to run into Ethan and Cecily. Thinking of what they did to her before, she felt increasingly irritable. She only hoped not to meet them. In the VIP ward of the hospital, Elder Grant was sleeping soundly. Ethan tucked the quilt for his grandfather before quietly leaving the room. Even though his movements were light enough, he still pulled at the old wound on his back. Thinking of the wound, he couldn't help frowning. 2 years ago, he was beaten severely by his grandfather because of the divorce and lay in bed for half a month before getting up. Learning this, Cecily used the excuse of visiting to apologize and actually drugged his water. If not for his quick reaction, he would have fallen for her trick. At that time, he shoved Cecily to the floor and rushed into the bathroom to shower in cold water. Unexpectedly, Cecily acted out of hate and set a big fire. The moment the beam fell, he lost consciousness. Precisely because of this fire, Cecily was sentenced to a reform labor camp in the countryside. She wouldn't be back for at least 10 years, and this result came only after the Jones family knelt at their door, begging for days. And he was seriously injured, bidding farewell to the battlefield for the rest of his life, only able to work behind the scenes. Elder Grant fell ill because of his affairs, calling it sinful. Ethan's parents also called back to scold him severely. They said once Elder Grant recovered, they would take him to stay with them, leaving Ethan alone in the capital. The injury was too severe. Whenever Ethan used a little strength, his back and bones ached incessantly. In an instant, his face went pale, cold sweat streamed down, his vision went black, and he collapsed to the floor. "Someone come quick, someone fainted here." Willow never expected that on her first day reporting back to the hospital, she would be pushed directly to the operating table, and the patient was Ethan Grant. In front of the operating table, there are no grudges. As a doctor, her task was to save the patient. Soon, she devoted herself entirely to the surgery. The hour hand on the wall clock went round and round. Willow stitched the last suture and put the surgical forceps back into the tray. Surgery successful. Soon, Ethan was pushed out of the operating room to the ward. Willow also began wrapping up, putting surgical gowns into the recycling bin while chatting with the assistant beside her. The conversation drifted to Ethan. It's a pity for Commander Grant, so young yet covered in injuries. Curiosity rose in Willow's heart. How did he get covered in injuries? The assistant was new and didn't know they had a history. Checking that no one was around, she lowered her voice. "I heard Commander Grant had a limitless future and could have been promoted in a few years. Who knew the Jones family daughter would turn hatred into violence? Failing to drug him, she set a fire directly. Tusk, you don't know how miserable Commander Grant looked when he was rescued. Later, they managed to save him, but he was left with injuries. Although he's still a leader, he retreated behind the scenes and can't rise further. Also, the Jones family is finished because of this. The daughter was sent to a farm labor camp, and the parents were dismissed from their posts and thrown to the South City." Hearing about the past, Willow sighed endlessly. She didn't expect the Jones and Grant families to end up like this in just 2 short years. Nor did she expect the two who were flirting back then would tear each other apart. But whatever happened to them was no longer her business. Thinking of this, she stopped and instructed the assistant. "I have several meetings and surgeries in the next few days. I'll leave Commander Grant to you guys." The assistant nodded. "Understood, Dr. York." For the next few days, Willow was incredibly busy, alternating between meetings and surgeries. She didn't even have time for lunch. It was Mrs. York who, distressed knowing this, brought her lunch every day. On the desk piled with various materials and documents, Willow cleared a space, placed the thick bag Mrs. York wrapped on the table, and carefully took out the metal lunchbox inside. Opening the lid, the aroma of meat hit her nose. "Oh, it's my favorite braised pork," Willow's eyes filled with surprise. Then she opened the lower layer. It was old hen soup. The aroma of the food made her stomach growl incessantly. Disregarding reserve, she began to eat heartily. "Eat more, look how thin you are." Mrs. York's eyes were full of heartache. She hadn't been back at the hospital long, and she was already losing weight. After lunch, Willow chatted with Mrs. York for a while before reluctantly sending her off. But just as she prepared to return to her office to rest, a nurse ran hurriedly from the corridor and shouted to her, "Dr. York, please go look quickly. Commander Grant's wound suddenly split open, and he's refusing treatment." In the ward, Willow put her hands in her pockets, looking at the man sedated by doctors, her face showing mockery. She never imagined her formal meeting with her ex-husband would be like this. On the way, the nurse explained the reason. It turned out that during rounds, a doctor said too much, mentioning Willow was his lead surgeon. Ethan intended to ask more out of gratitude, only to find out the Dr. York who operated on him was Lydia Jones, the love he had searched for 2 years. Disregarding his post-surgery body, he insisted on finding her. In the struggle, the wound tore open and bled again. It wasn't until he was pinned down and sedated that he quieted down. As the drug took effect, Ethan's eyelids grew heavy, but he forced himself to stay spirited, looking at Willow before him. Unseen for 2 years, she had become more beautiful, her eyes firmer, no longer holding the fear of the past. When looking at him, there was no love left, only estrangement. "Willow, Ethan Grant, do you know what you look like right now?" Back when she was discharged, passing Cecily's ward, she inadvertently glanced inside and saw Cecily making a scene. Insisting he hold her before taking medicine. Just like him now, insisting on seeing her to quiet down. Unfortunately, she wasn't him. She didn't have that patience. If you want to continue making trouble, get out and do it. Medical resources are precious. We don't have room for your dramatics here. Finished, she turned and left without looking at him again. "Willow," he instinctively tried to grab her hand, but the sedative took effect. His hand hanging in mid-air suddenly dropped, and he fell into a deep sleep. Perhaps Willow's words worked. For the next few days, Ethan didn't make a scene again. This day, Willow finally finished handling all matters. Just as she walked out of the hospital gate, a voice came from behind. Willow. She looked back and saw Ethan being supported by the butler, slowly walking down the steps. Willow, can we talk? His tone held a plea, but she didn't have the time. Commander Grant, we are only in a doctor-patient relationship. She reminded him they had nothing else to talk about. Besides, I have plans. If you have any physical issues, you can find your attending physician. With that, Willow didn't look at him again and moved towards a car. Willow, Willow. Two voices rang out simultaneously. A man stepped out of the car and took the bag from Willow's hand. Unlike the coldness shown to Ethan, the moment Willow saw this man, she revealed a most sincere smile. Harrison, why are you here? Harrison Spencer patted her head, eyes smiling. Didn't you say you wanted to eat the braised pork at the Bridge restaurant? I made a reservation the day before yesterday, thought I'd take you to taste it today. As the two talked and moved towards the car, Willow suddenly felt her hand tighten. Turning, she saw Ethan grabbing her hand, panic in his eyes. Willow, who is he? Willow's eyes hardened. She tried to pull her hand away, but found she couldn't break free. None of your business, let go. You're hurting me. Ethan refused to let go, his face darkening. What is our relationship? The rest of the words stuck in his throat. Indeed, what relationship did they have? They divorced long ago. While he was stunned, Harrison shoved him away and rubbed Willow's reddened wrist. Ethan Grant, is it? Let me introduce myself properly. I am Willow's fiancé. If Willow hadn't been switched at birth, you wouldn't have had the chance to know her at all. Not long after Willow arrived in Europe, the York family held a banquet to officially announce to the world that the true daughter of the York family had been found. Out of courtesy, Harrison brought generous gifts to congratulate, but he didn't expect to fall in love with Willow at first sight. At first, Willow couldn't accept him. Firstly, she was divorced. Secondly, having just walked out of a failed marriage, she wasn't ready for another relationship. Harrison expressed understanding, saying they could start as friends. Over time, they became familiar. She gradually opened her heart to him, and finally, they got engaged in Europe 6 months ago. Hearing his words, Ethan's face went pale. Willow had a fiancé, then what was his 2 years of waiting for? He thought this and said it aloud. Willow sneered. I didn't ask you to wait for me. Besides, when you abandoned me time and again to find Cecily, did you ever ask for my opinion? Furthermore, we divorced long ago. My life has nothing to do with you anymore. With that, she didn't look at him again, took Harrison's arm, and got into the car. In the private booth of the restaurant, Harrison thoughtfully served food to Willow. This place uses Huedale wine for their braised pork. Try it. She thanked him softly, tasted the piece he served, and her eyes lit up. Delicious. The meat is tender and melts in the mouth. He smiled and served her a piece of fish. Try this. The restaurant says it was caught from the river today. Willow nodded. You eat too. I can do it myself. They enjoyed the meal thoroughly. Finally, Harrison personally drove her home. Since it wasn't far from the York residence, they walked back from where they parked. Along the way, under the bright moonlight, she couldn't help but talk about funny stories from the past. Only these stories no longer featured Ethan. Harrison listened seriously, occasionally adding a sentence or two. The night deepened. Before they reached the York house, they saw a tall figure standing at the main gate. She recognized Ethan at a glance. Willow frowned. She was a bit tired and really didn't want to entangle with him further. So she tugged on Harrison's sleeve and walked down a side path. They circled halfway around before entering through the back door of the York house. Since it was late, Mrs. York thanked Harrison and warmly invited him to stay in the guest room for the night. Willow also tugged his sleeve, finally watching him enter the guest room. She then returned to her room, but she didn't turn on the light. She just gently lifted a corner of the curtain to look at the figure outside the gate. Just one glance, then she closed the curtain and went back to bed. Inside the gate, seeing the York courtyard remain dark for a long time, bitterness rose in Ethan's heart. What was he expecting? Willow and Harrison were engaged. Even if she stayed over at the Spencer house, it wouldn't matter. Thinking of this, he took one last look at the courtyard, turned in despair, and vanished into the night. Willow thought that as long as she wanted to hide, she could avoid meeting Ethan. But the next day when she went to work at the hospital, the nurse on duty stopped her and pulled a bag of fruit from under the counter. Dr. York, this is fruit specially sent by Commander Grant's people, saying it's to thank you for operating on him last time. Willow frowned at the bag of fruit and didn't take it. Usually when patients thanked the hospital, they wrote thank you letters. Rarely did anyone send fruit, and such expensive fruit at that. She didn't believe there wasn't a selfish motive from Ethan. Besides, they had no relationship, and she didn't need his gratitude. Thinking of this, she turned to the nurse. Return these fruits to wherever they came from. I don't need them. Also, please tell the sender I don't need his thanks. But the nurse looked troubled. Dr. York, the sender said fruit sent out is like spilt water. There's no logic in taking it back. Just as she opened her mouth to speak, a male voice came from behind. Willow. She turned to see Harrison walking over carrying a large bag of fruit. She walked over pleasantly surprised. Why are you here? Harrison smiled faintly. Heard from your mom that you've been too busy to eat lately. Thought I'd bring some fruit to pad your stomach. He was about to put the fruit on the table when he saw the other bag. Who sent this? Willow said indifferently. Who else but Ethan Grant? I clearly made it clear to him, yet he still wants to entangle with me. If it were the old Lydia, she would have taken the fruit and smashed it on Ethan, arguing with him and saying harsh words. But the current Willow didn't want to pay attention to him at all. That would only continue the entanglement and waste her energy and time. I wanted someone to send these fruits back, but the person sent by Ethan said there's no logic in taking back gifts. Isn't that making things difficult? The more she spoke, the more annoyed she felt. Whether she accepted it or not, the fruit couldn't be returned. Wouldn't Ethan imagine she still had feelings for him and that they still had a chance? Knowing Ethan for so long, she just discovered he was this kind of person. She clearly had a fiancé, yet he did things that caused misunderstanding. Luckily, Harrison was reasonable. If it were anyone else, she would truly be suffering in silence. Hearing her words, Harrison frowned. He patted her head. Eat some fruit to pad your stomach first so you can work later. Leave this bag to me. Willow nodded and gave a few fruits from the bag to the nurse on duty. Share these among yourselves. Rest well when the next shift comes. Thank you, Dr. York. The nurse happily took the fruit and walked to her office. She turned to chat with Harrison for a while longer before returning to her office to work. Watching Willow disappear from his sight, Harrison put away his smile, picked up the fruit on the table, and walked out. Getting into the car, he ordered the driver directly to the Grant residence. Outside the Grant family gate, Harrison lowered the car window, looking at Ethan walking towards him, a smile not reaching his eyes. He reached out and threw the fruit at his feet to Ethan's feet. What does Mr. Grant mean by sending fruit? Willow is my fiancé. Sending fruit is something I, her fiancé, should do. Not only did you send fruit presumptuously, but you also forbade returning it. If malicious people spread rumors ruining Willow's reputation, what should she do? More seriously, if someone reports it and sends Willow to a labor camp for reform, have you considered the consequences? Mr. Grant, can you use your brain when doing these things? Ethan's face was pale, his hands hanging by his side clenched tight. Indeed, when he sent the fruit, he only thought about making Willow accept it so he would have a reason to talk to her later and win her back. After all, she was the person he loved most. How could he be willing to watch her marry someone else? It was his lack of consideration. But hearing Harrison's words, his face grew uglier. So what if she's a fiancé? As long as they weren't married, he still had a chance. Harrison didn't even look at him, closing the window directly and telling the driver to drive off. Left alone, Ethan froze in place. In the end, he didn't pick up the fruit on the ground and turned back to the courtyard. The butler followed carefully behind him. Sir, shall we continue sending fruit? Ethan paused. Send those fruits to the welfare home. By the way, next week is Willow's birthday. Have someone prepare fireworks to set off by the river then. The butler nodded and hurriedly left to call people. Ethan looked at the scenery outside the window, determination flashing in his eyes. This time he must move Willow so she would give him another chance. Willow's birthday happened to be on a Saturday. In the morning, Mrs. York personally cooked longevity noodles for her, gave her several birthday gifts, and then watched with Mr. York as she got into Harrison's car. Along the way, she was curious, wondering where Harrison would take her. But Harrison kept it a secret. No matter how she asked, he didn't speak. Finally, the car drove to the riverside and Harrison led her into a house. He greeted the owner skillfully. Aunt Lou, the usual, add a rib soup. Aunt Lou warmly invited them to sit inside. Opening the window revealed the winding river. Harrison thoughtfully pulled out a chair for Willow, inviting her to sit before sitting opposite her. Aunt Lou used to be our housekeeper. Her cooking is superb. She resigned to go home because her son was getting married. But because she has a good relationship with our family, whenever we crave something, we tell Aunt Lou in advance. Willow nodded, remembering the 2 bags of gifts he handed Aunt Lou upon entering. Even for just a meal, proper etiquette couldn't be lacking. Soon, several steaming dishes were served. Every dish was perfect in color, aroma, and taste, making her appetite surge. After the meal, Aunt Lou thoughtfully served them a pot of hot tea and chatted with them for a few sentences before personally seeing them out. Having just eaten dinner, the 2 walked hand in hand along the riverside toward home. On the way, pedestrians were in groups of 3 or 5, bustling with noise, with occasional shouts from vendors. "Want some candied hawthorn?" Harrison pointed to the bright red candied haws on a straw stick held by a vendor nearby. She shook her head. "Don't have a sweet tooth." He didn't insist and continued walking forward. Suddenly, fireworks lit up the mid-air, blooming cluster after cluster, illuminating half the sky. Many pedestrians stopped to watch, exclaiming and guessing who was so generous. The fireworks show lasted for a full half-hour without ending. Looking at the familiar fireworks, Willow's face looked somewhat unpleasant. Who else could it be? Every year at this time on her birthday, Ethan would set off fireworks by the river for her. Back then, he held her and affectionately said his fireworks were only for her. But less than 6 months after Cecily returned, he set off countless fireworks for Cecily. If the fireworks of the past were blessings, today's fireworks seemed to remind her that she had an unbearable marriage. Thinking of this, she pulled Harrison's hand to leave. Unexpectedly, a figure rushed out, holding something in his hands. "Willow!" Harrison quickly shielded her behind him, looking warily at Ethan in front of them. Ethan didn't take Harrison seriously at all, trying to bypass him to chase Willow. "Ethan Grant, what are you doing?" she shouted impatiently. Ethan stopped, speaking carefully. "Willow, today is your birthday. I wanted to give you a gift, you—" "Not needed." Willow refused coldly, her eyes full of impatience and annoyance. "Ethan Grant, I've made things clear enough to you. Why do you still want to entangle with me? What will others think of me?" Hearing this, Ethan's face went pale, and he quickly explained. "No, I'm not entangling with you. I just want to beg you to give me a chance to pursue you again." "Willow, I can explain what happened back then. It was because I felt bad that you were constantly yielding to Cecily, so I thought to be nicer to Cecily to make your family more harmonious. After all, they are the family you've lived with for so many years." "Ha!" Harrison sneered and threw a punch. If it were the Ethan of the past, he would have reacted and fought back long ago. But now, covered in injuries and not fully recovered, being hit by Harrison sent him falling to the ground, unable to get up for a long time. The crowd exclaimed, but no one dared to intervene. "Ethan Grant, if I remember correctly, I warned you long ago. Willow is my fiancée. Everything for her should be prepared by me, her fiancée. We don't need an outsider like you gesturing and dictating. And giving you a chance to pursue? What daydream are you talking about?" Hearing this, the bystanders realized the person on the ground harbored such thoughts and began pointing fingers at Ethan. "I thought so. What he said was so baffling. Exactly, they are a fine couple, yet he insists on interfering. Pa, shameless. Ethan Grant, you claim you were nice to Cecily for my sake. Listen to yourself, do you believe that? As soon as Cecily returned to the Jones family, my status plummeted. And you, as my husband, my only support, abandoned me, your wife, time and again to please Cecily. Why didn't you use your own interests to please her instead of mine? Just whose husband are you?" Willow's eyes held a trace of hatred and pain. "Family? I treated them as family, but did they ever treat me as family? Just because they found I didn't look like them, they alienated me. After Cecily returned, they didn't even act anymore, cursing me with ugly words time and again. You didn't help me, instead, you asked me to yield to them. You are the one who belongs to their family. You said you wanted to help us reconcile. Is your so-called help abandoning me time and again to accompany Cecily?" Her gaze became colder. Looking at Ethan's pale and guilty face, she felt no relief in her heart, only exhaustion. "Ethan Grant, for the sake of our childhood friendship, stop entangling with me." There is no possibility for us ever again. No, don't. Ethan's face grew paler, reaching for her hand. Willow, clearly we promised before you wouldn't leave me. A bitterness rose at the corner of Willow's mouth, her eyes full of resolve. But you also told me you would protect me forever. The day he proposed, he held her tight and said, Lydia, I've liked you for 10 whole years. I want to protect the country with you. Will you build a family with me? I will be loyal to you as I am to the country. I will protect you until death and never let you suffer grievances. He spoke so affectionately and seriously then. But less than 6 months after Cecily appeared, he completely forgot his vows and fell for Cecily. When she was allergic to pollen and dying, he hung up her phone to accompany Cecily. Finally, he made excuses for Cecily, saying she just wanted to play a prank. When the explosion happened in the mall, he unhesitatingly abandoned her and ran to Cecily, who was further from the explosion point only because of guilt. He took care of her for half a month. Back then he said, Lydia, I'm really sorry. I had a reason for saving Ceci first. Wait until this period passes, I will explain everything to you clearly. On the day she went abroad, he called saying he wanted to explain, but later her colleague told her he didn't return that day. He was taking care of Cecily. Ethan's love words, vows, and affection could only be listened to, not believed. Never believe them, or you will fall into an endless abyss. It was because she was too naive, choosing to believe him and wait for him time and again, that she ended up covered in scars. This time, no matter what, she wouldn't soften or compromise. Ethan Grant, I've made my words clear enough. If you continue to entangle like this and cause me distress, even if you are an Air Force commander, I will report you to your superiors. If you really don't care, feel free to try. Don't exhaust the last bit of friendship we have left. Having said this much, Ethan's heart felt tightly wrapped in vines, pain blacking out his vision in waves. He even forgot how he left. It wasn't until he got into the car and recovered that he realized his face was covered in tears. Looking at the tears on his hand, he suddenly remembered a long time ago. At that time, Willow's eyes were full of him. She would sacrifice everything for his dreams, supporting him wholeheartedly. But after Cecily returned, after he went to care for Cecily time and again for her so-called good, the love in her eyes for him gradually dissipated. When he left her at the explosion site for Cecily, letting the beam smash onto her back, the love in her eyes for him vanished completely. Once he thought as long as he coaxed her, guarded her incessantly, and took care of her, her heart would eventually soften, and she would eventually forgive him. But now he understood, realized she wouldn't soften toward him anymore. Willow's words played in a loop in his mind, constantly asking him whether he was her husband or Cecily's husband. Now he finally recognized his identity. He was Willow's husband. Just like Grandpa told him back then, his wife was Willow. He shouldn't be so close to a sister-in-law or even cross the line. Moreover, this sister-in-law resented Willow because of the switch at birth. Yet instead of protecting Willow, he advised her to endure constantly, finally using his wife's interests to please her enemy. He had always been discerning, yet he made mistakes on such matters. Now he wanted to make amends, but she already had a fiancé by her side. Those things were now the fiancé's duty. That man would do better than him, love more exclusively. Ethan finally covered his face, not knowing what to do to win her back. But a voice in his heart kept telling him, don't waste effort, they couldn't go back to the past. Perhaps due to excessive despair, his spirit finally reached its limit. His spirit reached its limit. His vision went black, and he fainted completely. Meanwhile, on the river avenue, Willow stared blankly at the boats coming and going on the river. From the moment she was completely disappointed and no longer loved Ethan, she stopped hoping he would admit his mistake. When Cecily first came home, she had a good talk with him about this topic. As a brother-in-law, his kindness to Cecily exceeded a certain range. How did he answer her then? He said Cecily was her sister, suffered so much growing up, asked her to yield to Cecily, to think more for Cecily. When saying this, he was picking gifts to welcome Cecily back. At that time, she had a vague premonition that this marriage wouldn't last to old age. Now he finally realized his mistake, wanted to apologize, and win her back. Looking at his bitter begging, her heart was exceptionally calm. Why do people always realize their mistakes and think of regretting and making amends after losing? But what difference does it make? Lost is lost, it cannot be retrieved, and she didn't love him anymore. Lost in thought, a warm embrace hugged her tightly. She looked up and only saw Harrison's sharp chin. Don't be unhappy. Today is your birthday. Yes, today was her birthday. She shouldn't grieve here for an unrelated person. Soon, a smile bloomed again on Willow's face. He smiled with her, then pulled a small box from his pocket. This is the first time I'm spending a birthday with you, so I picked the gift for a long time. Hope you like it. The moment the box opened, even Willow, who had seen many rare jewels, couldn't help exclaiming. It was a very beautiful starry sky necklace. The blue sapphire in the middle of the necklace twinkled like a star in the sky. The first time I saw you, your eyes were exceptionally bright, so I thought of giving you a necklace like this. Do you like it? She was too stunned by the necklace to speak, only nodding repeatedly. Harrison chuckled and put it around her neck. Very beautiful. Willow's ears turned red quietly. She hugged his waist, resting her head on his chest, quietly listening to his steady and powerful heartbeat. In the hospital, when Ethan woke up again, the doctor looked at him with a worried face holding the medical chart. Commander Grant, if you keep tossing around like this, you really won't have many years left. Ethan had no reaction. So what if he didn't have many years? He lived now only to atone to the past and present Willow. As for winning her back, he knew deeply it was impossible. He looked up out the window, his thoughts drifting far. Suddenly, he remembered a long time ago, when he went to take care of Cecily and didn't return until much later. He often saw Willow sitting alone, looking out the window, motionless. At that time, he wondered what was there to see besides the 2 rows of trees and pedestrians coming and going. Now, he sat alone on the bed, looking out the window, only to discover that occasionally a flock of birds would fly across the sky. The flock rushed into his vision and quickly rushed out, disappearing. Just like Willow, rushing into his world to stay for a few years, then leaving his world without nostalgia. The news of Ethan's hospitalization soon spread throughout the circle. Since parting with Willow, he entered the hospital from time to time due to physical reasons. At first, all his comrades came to visit him. But later, as his deeds were exposed, fewer and fewer people came to see him. In the end, only Old Wilson, who had followed him since enlistment, remained. Old Wilson looked at the numb and depressed person on the bed and couldn't help sighing. Look at you, how did you become like this? Back when Willow was hospitalized, it was Old Wilson who led the comrades to visit her, and it was he who slipped up about the fireworks surprise Ethan prepared. When the surprise was mentioned, Ethan's face went pale instantly. Old Wilson thought he was panicked because the surprise was spoiled. Now knowing about him and Cecily, he realized those surprises were prepared for Cecily. Old Wilson still remembered clearly how grand Cecily's birthday was. After all, it made the newspapers. Now Old Wilson suddenly realized that in all the years Willow celebrated her birthday, it was just treating them to a meal and setting off fireworks. Compared to Cecily's birthday banquet, it was worlds apart. He felt unjust for Willow. Married for so many years, yet she couldn't compare to a newly returned sister-in-law. Old Wilson nagged a lot, but Ethan remained numb and depressed. He didn't want to say more, nor did he want to visit Ethan anymore. So he put down the fruit he brought, left a phrase, "Take care of yourself," and turned to leave, leaving him alone sitting there. In a trance, he seemed to hear Willow's voice, seeming to want to change his dressing. He vaguely extended his arm. It wasn't until pain came that he snapped back, realizing the one changing his dressing was a strange nurse. "Commander Grant, you have to take medicine on time so your body will recover, and you can be discharged early." Looking at the barely touched medicine bottle, the nurse couldn't help advising. "After all, you need to get better soon so your family won't worry." He nodded woodenly, bitterness rising in his heart. His family didn't want him anymore. Grandpa was taken south by his parents after recovering. His former wife now refused to reconcile with him. He was truly alone. He had nothing left. "What did you say? Cecily is back in the capital?" Willow stood up abruptly looking at Mrs. York, then was pulled back to the sofa by Harrison beside her. Mrs. York was also unhappy. The daughter she raised for so long turned out to be an ungrateful wretch. Cecily's uncle saved her from the countryside. Although the penalty of labor reform is gone, she has to sweep streets and pick up trash every day, doing all the dirty work. Also, don't worry about her. Although she's back in the capital, no one is willing to be neighbors with the Jones family anymore, so she can only live in the slums in the north of the city. Willow had mixed feelings. Counting the time, she hadn't seen Cecily for almost 2 years, except for an accidental glance in the newspaper that year. It was a photo taken by a Capital reporter reporting on the farm. Cecily stood small in the corner, skinny and bony, her eyes dead. Completely different from when she was in the Jones family. Mrs. York also said that although Cecily didn't cause any deaths when setting the fire, she injured an Air Force commander. So when Cecily's uncle pleaded for her, the higher-ups used the opportunity to demote him. This caused his wife to divorce him, and Cecily's grandmother cursed Cecily and Martha, cutting ties. Finally, the uncle also angrily cut ties with the mother and daughter and went to the southwest. Why did Cecily's uncle help then? Willow really didn't understand their logic. Mrs. York sneered. It's because Martha hid the truth, making Cecily's uncle think Cecily committed a minor offense and was being targeted by people in the capital, so he used his connections to plead, threatening to make a scene if they didn't agree. The higher-ups couldn't stand it and relented, also giving him a lesson in the process. They talked for a while longer before preparing to return to their rooms to rest. As if remembering the main purpose of the chat today, Mrs. York stopped Willow. By the way, now that Cecily is back, stay away from her. Who knows what temperament she has after the labor camp? Be careful. The next morning, Harrison drove Willow to the hospital. While stuck in traffic, she looked boredly at the street scene, but her gaze suddenly landed on someone. That person, in tattered clothes, was bowing carefully and apologizing to pedestrians ahead. But the pedestrians wouldn't listen to the explanation, insisting on compensation. When that person looked up, Willow quickly recognized the face. It was Cecily. Cecily's face was even thinner than in the photo. Her withered hair was suddenly yanked by a pedestrian, but she didn't dare struggle, only continuing to beg for mercy. Willow couldn't watch anymore and withdrew her gaze. Cecily, who was begging the pedestrian, instinctively looked in Willow's direction but only saw the fleeing taillights. All right, just a street sweeper, stop fussing. An apology is enough. Bystanders couldn't stand it and stepped forward to persuade. Finally, the person spat on the ground in front of Cecily and left angrily. Cecily bowed her head lower, apologizing continuously to the surroundings. Only after everyone dispersed did she pick up the broom to continue sweeping. Suddenly, her gaze froze, staring dead at the person crossing the street ahead. That was Ethan Grant Hospital. Dr. York, 2 car accident patients, just arrived with massive hemorrhaging. Please go take a look. Willow had just finished rounds. Hearing this, she disregarded everything else, put away her pen, and ran to the operating room. At a glance, she saw Ethan and Cecily lying on the operating tables. She paused but quickly reacted. Prepare for immediate surgery. After several hours of surgery, Willow took off her surgical gown and breathed a sigh of relief. Although the two looked serious, they only had minor abrasions. As for the blood on them, it probably came out during a dispute later. Sure enough, the assistant leaned in gossiping, checking left and right before whispering. Dr. York, I heard those 2 accident victims used to be brother-in-law and sister-in-law. The sister-in-law thought she could take the spot after the sister left, but the brother-in-law had no interest in her. Unexpectedly, she acted out of hate and set a fire, almost burning him. As a result, she was sent to a labor camp by him. It's only been a few years, yet they ended up in the hospital like this. Enemies really cross narrow paths. I heard the sister-in-law chase the brother-in-law onto the road. They didn't see the oncoming car while entangled, causing the accident. Truly sinful. Willow thought, indeed sinful. If Ethan had known Cecily was this kind of person back then, would he have taken such care of her? For the post-operative observation of the two, Willow handed it over to other doctors. She really didn't want to interact much with the 2 people who ruined her marriage, so everything about them was relayed to her by assistants. She heard that after waking up, they wanted to argue again, but stopped due to their injuries. Ethan thought about changing wards, but currently all wards were full, so he could only continue staying with Cecily. Ethan could only endure, but for Cecily, this was undoubtedly a good opportunity. However the Grant family was, their status was higher than the Jones family. If she could carry a child of the Grant family, maybe she could live her old life again. Back then, If she had succeeded in drugging him, perhaps she would have given birth and become Mrs. Grant long ago. Now that God gave her a chance to start over, Cecily had to grasp it well. This time, Cecily learned to be smart. Instead of drugging him to his face, she used all her money to bribe a nurse to give Ethan an injection containing sleeping agents. When Ethan was sleeping groggily, she poured the drug directly into his mouth and succeeded. When hearing this, Willow's jaw dropped in shock. She thought Cecily would have learned to behave after 2 years of reform in the countryside. She didn't expect the nature to remain unchanged. She heard that after Ethan woke up, he wanted to strangle Cecily. Ethan's aunt got the news and rushed over to stop the tragedy. Then, she made a scene saying Ethan must take responsibility. Those who didn't know would think the aunt was Cecily's relative. Speaking of this aunt, even the usually good-tempered Willow couldn't accept her. Relying on Elder Grant's doting, she demanded whatever she wanted since childhood, making a fuss whenever things didn't go her way. Now that Elder Grant wasn't in the capital, naturally no one could stop her. In the past, Ethan also granted whatever she asked, sometimes even disregarding Willow's feelings. Perhaps even earlier, Ethan wasn't wholeheartedly devoted to her. With the aunt's fuss, even the police came, but ultimately couldn't clear things up. They could only punish both sides. The Grant family paid money, and Cecily went to jail a second time. Willow didn't know about the follow-up until she went shopping for wedding items with Harrison. At that time, she was dazzled by the array of wedding rings in the cabinet, wearing rings on all 10 fingers, yet hadn't chosen the final one. Harrison wanted to buy them all, but she shook her head, saying it was wasteful. Just as she was hesitating, a familiar and boastful voice came from behind. "Willow York, what a coincidence, you guys are here too?" The two turned around and saw Cecily standing there holding her lower abdomen, lifting her chin, triumphantly looking at her. Willow glanced around her and found no Ethan. She just found it funny. It turned out that not long after Cecily went to prison, she was found pregnant. Coupled with the aunt's manipulation, she was released again. But because she wasn't welcomed by Ethan, she had no one else besides herself and a nanny when going out. Cecily walked over and glanced at the counter. "Choosing rings? What a coincidence, I'm choosing rings too." Since getting pregnant, the Jones family went to the Grant family to cause a scene again. Helplessly, the Grant family had to acknowledge this daughter-in-law, sending a nanny to protect the child in her belly. Upgraded to the prospective Mrs. Grant, Cecily became arrogant, showing off her belly everywhere, and her eyes looking at Willow were full of provocation. "Look, your position as Mrs. Grant became mine after all." Willow just thought Cecily had mental issues. Did she like the things Willow used and the man Willow married that much? Since childhood, whatever appeared in Willow's hands would appear in Cecily's hands the next day. Clearly, Cecily could ask the butler to buy new ones, but she refused. Now she set her sights on her ex-husband again. Given Cecily's background, she could marry an excellent man, yet she held onto Ethan tightly, trying again and again if she failed. She really didn't know what Cecily was thinking. Cecily continued to show off, but Willow was too lazy to listen, dragging Harrison's hand to leave. Cecily thought Willow was afraid, becoming more arrogant. She turned back and pointed at the rings Willow had selected. "Wrap all these up for me." The nanny looked troubled, pulling her hand and whispering, "Madam, the Grant family only gave you $1,000 a month, and this $1,000 wasn't given by Ethan, but by the Grant elders for the sake of her pregnancy, telling her to eat well and recover, forbidding reckless spending." Cecily's face went pale. $1,000 couldn't even buy one ring here, but the sales clerk had already wrapped all the rings she pointed at and handed them to her. "Ma'am, these 10 rings total $15,000. Would you?" Hearing this, Cecily's face went stark white. Even using all the money given by the Grant and Jones families, it was at most $10,000. Her eyes shifted, and suddenly she hugged her belly. "Ouch, my stomach hurts. Take me to the hospital quickly." Watching the two flee, the sales clerk rolled her eyes. Why pretend if you can't afford it? On the other side, just as Willow and Harrison, having bought all wedding supplies, were about to go downstairs, they saw Cecily being supported by the nanny rushing out, empty-handed. The two smiled at each other but said nothing. As the wedding approached, Mrs. York asked Willow and Harrison to visit the temple outside the capital to pray and increase their bond. The last time she came here, she was with Ethan, erasing their memories bit by bit. Now she came to create memories with Harrison. The lovers' bridge was still full of concentric locks, but Willow no longer desired to hang one. Harrison respected her suggestion, proposing to hang a prayer plaque on the bodhi tree to pray for peace and happiness. Just as they finished hanging it and Willow prepared to leave, two figures walked over from not far away. "Ethan, wait for me," Cecily tried to grab his sleeve, but Ethan ignored her, striding forward. Suddenly seeming to see something, he stopped abruptly, causing Cecily to almost crash into him. "Willow?" Ethan's eyes were full of pain and helplessness. Even if he couldn't be with Willow, he could silently protect her. But now that he had done that kind of thing with Cecily, whom she disliked the most, what qualification did he have to protect her? Looking at their clasped hands, the pain in his eyes became more apparent. Undoubtedly making Cecily vigilant, she grabbed his arm, and no matter how he moved, he couldn't shake her off. Watching Cecily's possessive action, Willow just found it amusing. Without giving them a second glance, she turned to leave with Harrison. Ethan instinctively wanted to chase, but Cecily held him tight, resentful. "Ethan Grant, think clearly, whose husband are you right now?" He wanted so much to answer he was Willow's husband, but he had no right. He could only tentatively probe Willow. "Willow, can I attend your wedding?" Even if they couldn't go back, he hoped to watch her wear a wedding dress one more time. Unfortunately, there were no ifs. Willow's steps didn't pause at all. Just like that, holding Harrison's arm, she disappeared from his sight step by step. "HMPH, you still want to attend her wedding?" Keep dreaming, seeing no one else around, Cecily let go of his hand, mocking sarcastically. Shut up, but Cecily wasn't afraid. After all, she carried the Grant family's offspring. "Instead of thinking about attending someone else's wedding, you better think about how to hold ours." Cecily's belly was getting bigger. If there wasn't even a wedding, not only the Jones family, but the Grant family would be scolded by outsiders. Compelled, Ethan had to get the certificate with Cecily and come to the temple to pray with her. Mentioning the wedding, Ethan's eyes grew colder. What difference did holding it or not make? The whole capital knew about him and Cecily. Now, whenever Cecily was mentioned, his name was always attached. Thinking of this, he walked straight ahead. "Do whatever you want." Anyway, he, the groom, just needed to show up then. Seeing his indifferent words, dissatisfaction grew in Cecily's heart. She could only stomp her foot and chase after him. The Grant family held a wedding again after 5 years. Because she had received kindness from Elder Grant, Willow and Harrison brought gifts to attend the wedding. Because of Cecily, very few people attended the wedding, and those who came did so with the intention of watching the drama. Sure enough, just as the MC was about to announce the start of the wedding, someone rushed in, holding a stick to hit Cecily. "Cecily Jones, I'm going to kill you," it was Cecily's cousin. The cousin just returned from abroad and heard about her father being demoted to save Cecily. Asking carefully, she learned that in order to return to the capital, Cecily conspired with Martha to deceive her father. Turning a murderous matter into a trivial one, how could she not be angry? Since Cecily dared to ruin her father's future, she would ruin Cecily's wedding because Willow sat in the corner. The chaos didn't affect her. And Harrison protected her tightly, allowing her to watch the drama intently. She saw several people entangled together. Because Cecily was pregnant, the nannies protected her tightly, and guards quickly arrived to control the cousin. Only then did the farce end. Everyone dispersed. Willow followed Harrison home. But in the evening, the hospital called asking if Willow knew the home number of Dr. Wang from gynecology. While giving the number to the nurse, Willow asked what happened. The head nurse sighed while dialing Dr. Wang's number. What else could it be? Cecily lost the baby. Willow's eyes widened instantly. Cecily's health wasn't good before pregnancy. Now, with the cousin's disturbance, she started bleeding on the spot. After being sent to the hospital, Cecily began to hemorrhage heavily. Even though Dr. Wang arrived in time, he could only save Cecily's life. Having lost the grandson, the Grant family was furious and sent Cecily's cousin directly to the labor camp. Having lost the child, Cecily became paranoid all day, acting crazy. This made Ethan miserable. He wanted to hide all day, but ended up distracted and hit by a car, destined to be wheelchair-bound for the rest of his life. Hearing Ethan and Cecily ended up like this, Willow sighed endlessly. After telling Mrs. York, she also lamented the sin. Fortunately, you divorced that man and cut ties with the Jones family in time. If you hadn't left then, who knows what it would be like. Willow also rejoiced in her decisiveness back then. Mrs. York patted her hand. All right, let's not think about these messy things. How are the preparations for your and Harrison's wedding going? Mentioning the wedding, Willow blushed and lowered her head. Harrison beside her thoughtfully held her hand and smiled. Mom, Willow and I are mostly prepared. Next Monday is a good day. We decided to get the certificate then. The Friday after that, we'll hold the wedding. I've called my parents. They will return from the U.S. in advance. Soon it was the day they got the certificate. Although she had gotten a certificate long ago, at that time, Ethan was busy, so the time was rushed. Before she could recover, the warm certificate was in her hand. Now she and Harrison had ample time, so every step required for the certificate was done with extra seriousness. They seriously changed into new shirts, seriously signed the marriage agreement, seriously sat in front of the red cloth, snuggling closely, holding hands, showing their most beautiful smiles to the camera. After an afternoon, Willow and Harrison finally got the marriage certificate. She held the certificate with mixed feelings. What's wrong? Harrison asked with concern. Willow smiled and pointed at the marriage certificate in her hand. I just realized getting a certificate takes so long. She always thought getting a certificate was a quick matter. Only today did she know it took a long time. Long enough for her to recall everything about meeting, knowing, and loving Harrison. The day Willow got married, the weather was fine. The entire wedding venue was meticulously decorated. The decorations were all wind chimes and ribbons that Willow liked. On one side of the stage, a piano master focused on playing beautiful piano music, while the other side was filled with various desserts. All were flavors Willow liked. In the room, Willow made final preparations. She took a deep breath and asked the bridesmaid to zip up the back of her dress. She put on brand new high heels, applied her makeup, clasped her hands, and sat quietly on the edge of the bed. Finally, the clock struck 12. The room door was finally knocked open by Harrison using red envelopes. Holding artificial flowers, he knelt on one knee in front of her, his eyes smiling. Willow, I'm here to take you home. Willow smiled even more sweetly, reaching out to take his flowers. She climbed onto his back and was carried steadily downstairs by him. Amidst the lively and festive music, guests stood in 2 rows by the stage, throwing ribbons at the bride and groom. And far away, Ethan sat in a wheelchair, hiding behind a tree, watching Willow's wedding from a distance. Watching her wearing a white wedding dress, holding Harrison's hand, walking step by step towards the stage. Watching them solemnly vow before the officiant, watching them kiss passionately. The cheers grew farther away. He inexplicably thought of the scene on his wedding day with Willow. Wanting to see that scene clearly, he sadly discovered that the wedding that day was too rushed. He even left in a hurry right after the vows because of urgent business, so he never saw her slightly red-rimmed eyes. He suddenly laughed out loud, but that voice was full of bitterness. It turned out their marriage had predicted the ending on the wedding day. Their marriage wouldn't last, he would leave her first. Regret gradually rose from his heart, but it was all too late. The only thing he could do now was bless her. Willow, happy wedding. May you be happy for the rest of your life.